So I've been wanting to make this video for a while, because every boom bap video you see out there is either somebody just looping an old soul record and calling it a day, or just somebody telling you the genre is dead and you should move on. I don't think either of those people are right. You need proof. Look at the alchemist, Nicholas Cravens, Conductor with
Conductor, we have a problem.
Knowledge, Griselda. These guys aren't making throwback music. They understood what made boom bap work and just kept building forward from there. That's all this video is about. Not recreation, but continuation. We're building a foot beat from scratch, and every decision I make, I'm going to explain so you can actually take something away instead of just watching me click around. Before I touch anything, I want to say something most producers skip, and it's probably why their boom bap doesn't feel right. Boom bap is not a sound, it's a relationship. The boom is the kick, the bap is the snare. When you listen to Elmatic, what makes your head nod isn't the sound choice, it's the space between those two elements, the way the whole thing breathes. And honestly, that's our biggest problem right now, because we have access to everything. Unlimited sounds, unlimited plugins, unlimited choices. The producers who made the classic records had real limitations, and those limitations basically forced them to be restrained, and that there ended up being the whole thing. Subtraction is the skill. Every boom bap beat you've ever loved had more stuff taken out than put in. Keep that in mind as we go through this. So that's really the mindset going into this. Now let me open FL Studio and I will start with tempo. Now real quick, because I think most people don't think about this enough. I feel like most producers just pick a random number and start. I mean, I used to do that too, but most classic records sit somewhere between 85 and 95 BPM. That's kind of where the genre lives. There's something about that pace that makes it natural to nod to. Now, modern producers often push it a little closer to 100 without losing the feel. Like a lot of the Alchemist recent stuff lives up there. Actually, I'm going with 93 BPM for this one. It just fits the mood I'm going for. You want to find whatever tempo fits what you're trying to say with the beat. Don't just pick a random number. So let's actually start building this thing out with the drums first. Alright, the first thing I want to get into is the kick. And this is where most people go wrong straight away, because what I see constantly is producers throwing an 808 under a boom bap beat and wondering why it doesn't feel right. And like, I get it. 808 are just what we're used to at this point, but an 808 sustains, it's light, it carries. That's not what boom bap needs. What you want is something that just hits and get out of the way. Like, listen to this one. Now this one. Hear how the second one just disappears faster? That's the point. It makes room for everything else to breathe. That's why I'm using it. So kick goes on beat 1 and beat 3. I'm also going to sneak in a ghost kick. It's the same kick but pulled way down in volume, right at the end of bar 2, just before the snare comes in. You won't hear it consciously, but it makes the same snare land heavier when it hits. Little thing that makes a difference. As for a snare, it needs to crack, not snap, not pop, but crack. There's a difference and you'll hear it in a second. So when it comes to layering, it's a tool, not a requirement. Like plenty of legendary boom bap snares are literally just one sample and they're perfect. But if yours isn't giving you what you need, try layering two, like top layer for crack and attack. Bottom one slightly pitched down so it gives you the body underneath. Just the top one. The bottom one. Both of them together. You hear how they kind of become one thing, more physical together than either alone. I'm also going to add just a tiny bit of room reverb on the snare, like room size around 15%. Really short decay, enough that it feels like somebody just hit something instead of a sample being triggered off a keyboard. Snare goes on beat 2 and beat 4. Now velocity. And this is something I think most tutorials do mention but don't really go deep on. Every single hit at the exact same snare feels programmed because it is. Throw it manually. Kick 1, full velocity. Kick 3, slightly softer. Ghost kick, way down in the 20s. Hi-hats, all slightly different from each other. Nothing dramatic, just enough that nothing feels identical. The drums are sitting pretty good right now, but before we move on, there's one more thing I want to show you that nobody ever talks about in this kind of videos. Velocity and swing gets all the attention when people talk about making drums feel human. But what actually makes boom bap groove like the real thing is micro timing. And what I mean by micro timing is actually moving individual hits slightly off grid, not quantizing everything perfectly, then throwing swing on top of it. What I actually mean is actually going in and nudging specific hits by just a few milliseconds. Think about how a real drummer plays. The kick doesn't land exactly on downbeat every single time. Sometimes it's a tiny bit early because they were feeling urgent in that moment. The snare sometimes it's slightly off because they're leaning back into the pocket. And those little imprecisions are not mistakes. That's literally the groove. So what I'm going to do right now is zoom all the way into the piano, like maximum zoom, and move hits by a few ticks. Move the snare a few milliseconds late. Nudge the kick on beat 3 slightly early. Take 1 or 2 hi-hats and move them just slightly off from where others are sitting. Listen to the drums before. Now after. Like you can't really point to what changed, but you can feel it immediately. And that feeling is what boom bap is. Not the sounds, but the relationship between sounds in time. So now that the drums actually feel like something, let's get into the sample. So let's talk about sampling, because it seems like there's a lot of confusion around this. And I used to be confused too. You don't need vinyl. You don't need rare records. Sampling isn't about what you have access to. It's really about what you hear inside what you're listening to. The producers who made the classic records were finding these 2-second moments inside songs everyone had heard for years, and hearing something in those 2 seconds that nobody else did, and then building everything around that moment. You can also develop that ear with anything, even sample packs. But here's the mistake I see constantly. Somebody drags a full loop into the DAW, drops some drums underneath it and calls it a sample. That's looping, not sampling. What you want to do is find a moment, like a chord that rings out for half a second, a breath between phrases, something small. Then you chop it, repitch it, resample it until it becomes something that just didn't exist in the original recording. And here's the test I use. If someone can listen to your beat and immediately tell which loop you used, you haven't really sampled it yet. So I'm loading this soul loop and I'm not looking for any phrases. I'm just listening for a moment. Right there, between piano and strings, there's this background vocal doing a tiny little run for less than a second. Nobody would ever notice it in the original song. That's what I'm taking. So listen to it raw first. Now with saturation and filter on it. Hear how it already feels more worn out, like less digital. A small amount of vinyl texture on top of that, and it starts to feel like it actually came from somewhere real. On the vinyl thing, crackle is not boom bap. Like if the only reason your beat sound vintage is because you added crackle, it isn't solving the problem. The problem is that the musical content doesn't have enough feeling yet. So instead, use it as a finishing layer if it genuinely adds something instead of a shortcut. So the sample sits in F minor, and that's where everything else is going to get built, because the beat serves the sample, not the other way around. When you approach it like that, everything just feels like it belongs together. So the sample is in, and I like where it's sitting. Now let me add the bass line under all of this. So boom bap bass really has one job, and it's kind of a weird job. It needs to be felt without being noticed, and that's completely different from how an 808 works, where the bass is basically the main event and you're supposed to hear it. In boom bap, bass is support. It holds everything up from underneath without drawing attention to itself. If you're actively noticing the bass while the beat plays, it's probably doing too much work. So I'm keeping this really simple sine wave, short decay, no slide, root on beat 1, fifth on beat 3, and then a small chromatic walk on the last beat of bar 2 going into bar 3. Just enough tension that bar 3 feels like landing when it comes in. So let me play the bass by itself first. Now with the drums underneath it. See how it just kinda sits there. You feel it, but you're not really thinking about it. One thing I want to address, sidechain compression. It's fine if you use it subtly, but it's not really a boom bap technique. Boom bap worked because the bass line naturally left space around the kick. So if you just write a bass line that breathes around the kick, you won't need to sidechain at all. Good note placement is still the answer, okay? So drums, sample, bass line. It's actually starting to sound like something, but I feel like it still needs one more thing. So let me actually show you what I usually do here. What I want to add is one melodic element, and I'm playing this rather than sampling it. A piano with room to it, not clean and bright, something that sounds like it actually came from somewhere. Spitfire Labs has a free piano that's honestly perfect for this kind of thing. And one thing I want to be clear about, I'm only playing 4 notes, not a chord progression or anything like that. Just enough to make a beat feel like it's asking a question. So listen with it in. Now without it. Feel hard, right? Just 4 notes and the whole thing changes. That's genuinely all it needs. One more thing I like to do, I'm going to automate a filter on the sample so it briefly drops out on the fourth bar of every loop, like half a beat gone. Listen to what it does to the whole thing. That small absence just makes your brain register it harder when it comes back in. So now that everything is sitting right, I want to get into arrangement, because honestly, this is where I see most producers drop the ball. So most producers I know have folders full of 8-bar loops that never went anywhere, and usually it's not that the loop wasn't good, it's that they never really figured out how to let it grow over time. And arrangement in boom bap is especially important because everything is so minimal. You can't just throw a big drop to reset the energy like you would in other stuff. Everything has to be subtle, but you still have to have changes. So here's what I'm building: 8 bars straight through, nothing changes. I just want the listener to settle into the groove first. Bar 9, I'm pulling the sample out for 2 bars, just drums and bass. Listen to how different it feels when the sample comes back in. Like that break gives an ear a rest, so it hits fresh. It creates a pocket where an artist can come with their first bar without fighting the sample for it. Bar 11, the sample comes back in. This is when I'm introducing the piano for the first time, even though it was in the loop from the beginning. Timing when these appear is its own kind of arrangement move. Bar 17, I'm going to flip the sample. Same sample, but pitched down an octave and filtered to sound thinner and bright. So listen to the low version. Now the high version. Two completely different emotional sections without building two different beats. And that's honestly the difference between a loop and an actual song. So now that the arrangement is done and I'm pretty happy with where this is at, let's talk about mixing, because I want to show you something that I think most people get completely wrong. Boom bap mixing is not about loudness, it's really about depth and clarity. And the thing I want to say before I say anything else, boom bap is supposed to breathe. So listen to this with heavy compression on it. Hear how the live kinda goes away, like the variation between the quiet moments and the loud ones is not something to fix. That's the whole vibe. You compress the dynamics, you compress the feeling too. So for the kick, I'm going to use a light compression, enough to keep the transient consistent. The snare, I'm going to do parallel compression, which just means I'm going to bleed a compressed version of the snare with the dry signal. So listen to both of them together. See how you get the sustain from the compressed one and the crack from the other. That's what you want. Hi-hats, I'm not touching them, just leave them alone. The velocity variation we did earlier is already doing the job. Now the sample, I want it sitting behind the drums, like 2 to 3 dB quieter than your instinct says. And I know that sounds counterintuitive, but just listen to what it does to the feel of the whole thing. That front to back depth is a lot of why classic boom bap sounds three-dimensional in a way that modern beats just don't. So, a subtle tape emulation on the master bass for warmth and glue. And then a limiter at the very end, barely touching the picks. And if it's working hard, then something earlier in the chain is doing too much. That's pretty much the finished beat. If you want the exact sounds I used, the drum samples, bass sounds, effects and everything, they are all in my 2.5 gig Destiny pack, link in the description if you're serious about making beats. Alright, here's the final beat.
Madman Frankenstein, a dark creature, cooked like a chemist, drip coming flash in tall beaker. Shout out to D-Cap, bringing me as a guest speaker. Not talking about these looks when I'm bringing the blessed features. Oh, big hit combos, I'm on my 10X. Started coming at next, they moving headless. So jealous, approaches so relentless. My stroke gets top spinning and rolling. I'm playing tennis, the hottest in the game. We not one in the same. I drop bodies of pens, they still not entertained. I cup up Novocaine, that's rockstar in my veins. I'm up in my own lane, so you gotta crown me the king. Heat manga spit that turns the streets lava. The vibes are too hard. My beats from Wakanda, cute ass demeanor. I'm sweeter than candy. Steal girl while getting my cheeks pinched from your auntie.